Unemployed and Afraid acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this episode on and of the land where you, the listener, are tuning in from. We would like to pay our respects to elders past, present, and extend our respect to any First Nations, Aboriginal, and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today, acknowledging that this always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid, a podcast that explores the glorious mess of building your own business with the people doing it. I'm your host and fellow business builder, Kim Curtin. Thank you for being here. Let's get into some good, honest, small business chat. Hello there, small business superhero. It is so good to have your ears. Thank you for tuning in to hear personal journeys, real feels, and priceless inspo from other amazing small business superheroes. A little story about myself to kick us off today. I am strapping my own cape all the way on at the moment after recently doubling the amount of wonderful episodes I create for you, with 2 going out every week. And I'm relearning to juggle time, expectations on myself, and what I can achieve. And surprisingly, instead of making me feel overwhelmed with actions, well, actually not, I still feel a little bit overwhelmed, but it's actually made me hugely motivated. I'm employing an approach at the moment of marketing first. So starting every day thinking, what is one small thing I can do right now that helps get my business, this podcast, out into the world, and just going for it. And some days that looks like writing and sharing a piece of content on either LinkedIn or one of the other 45,000 social channels. Other days it's sending a scary email to a potential show sponsor or a media outlet for a possible feature. Oh, I say it with like a cringe because those things make me so nervous. That fear of rejection is just terrifying, isn't it? But it's just something I can do before starting to sift my way through the pile of admin that is inevitably going to be there, that's going to help me push my business forward. And that action seems to be creating a bit of a shift in mindset, which I'm finding really helpful, from working in it to working on it. And I know we always talk about making sure we do that as much as possible, but sometimes it could become one of those to-do list things that just kind of end up at the bottom of the pile. So maybe that might be helpful for you too, starting the day with anything that will help you grow your business. Today's guest also has loads of helpful tips and tricks and personal experience to share with you. And together, Tommy Murphy, founder of A1 Connect, and I chat about taking lessons from your youth into creating a business you're really proud of, the obligations we as business owners have to pay it forward wherever we can, putting the cart before the horse and building a business that you can grow into by taking big accountability steps early, the immense value of finding the right networking groups, finding ways to capture all of the thoughts that fly around in our entrepreneurial heads and be more organized with our various projects, and how to effectively negotiate and sell so that both parties in a deal are getting a win. There is so much value and insight in this episode for you. So let's do it. Let's get into the chat. I'm here with Tommy Murphy, founder and managing director of A1 Connect, where he helps marketers in tech, education, and professional services create demand through audio and video production, as well as media buying services. Uniquely, Tommy and A1 help brands create demand to their business while making a social impact, the only business that offers this combination of services in Australia. As an aspiring B Corp, an aspiration I think many of us could adopt to help us get there, A1 contributes to the UN's Sustainable Development Goals for 2030 by aiming for a 50-50 gender representation in leadership and suppliers, delivering quality education through the programs they provide to underserved high schools with 10% of their turnover dedicated to this, and advocating for healthy work practices for both employees and clients. With clients including Headspace, the Impact Collab, Solve Accounting, and even a maths participant, Tommy is well on his way to deliver his vision to become synonymous with creating economic opportunity for both businesses and young people. I can't wait to hear all about your journey so far, Tommy. Welcome to Unemployed and Afraid.
Hello, Kim. Thanks for having me.
You're so welcome. We definitely had to hit record because we'd been chatting for about half an hour about all the things.
Wasted all the good material. Let's hope we can keep this interesting for everyone.
And I'm loving your sound. It is just a glory when you get somebody who works in audio production, because that crisp and clear sound of your gear is pretty fantastic. I'm a little bit jealous, but we won't nerd out on all the technical stuff. I'll get right into just an easy question to kick us off with. I'd love to know, how would your best friend describe you?
My best friend would describe me as a bit of a larrikin. That's a word I've learned here in Australia. I'm a bit of a joker behind the scenes. I don't like to take things too seriously in my personal life. In business, I obviously do, but yeah, I just think it's very important to bring humor in most situations, really helps lift the mood. So I think humorous would be one of the descriptive words used. Loyal as well with my friends and family. Loyalty is something I hold in quite high regard, both in terms of giving loyalty and also in terms of how that's characteristics I like to see as well from the people that I work with. And I think just in general, if you treat people the right way, it's just the right thing to do in terms of how to operate in life, I think.
I couldn't agree more. And with larrikinism, you are in the right place. The more lols, the better, because if we don't laugh about this business journey stuff, we might very well cry. Before A1 Connect, before your business journey, who were you?
Yeah, so originally from Ireland, as many people are in Sydney, a large portion of us here. Yeah, so I think my journey in terms of business and when I knew that, being a business owner is something I wanted to do was quite early on when I was at school. I was always someone who just looked at things and problems a little bit differently. Jamie Oliver, I don't know if you know the chef, Jamie Oliver. So he did what was at the time a terrible thing, but retrospectively a great thing for the health of the nation. One of his documentaries ended up getting sweets and those sorts of things banned from school vending machines. So huge uproar amongst all of us who like to go and get our Mars bar at break time. But in that, I seen, I was one of the students who seen an opportunity at that time because we were quite near to the town where our school was. So a few of us would go to Asda, which is like the equivalent of Woolies back home, and we would stock up on chocolate bars. And then we would go into school and we would be the people who would sell those chocolate bars on for we would get them for maybe 40p and sell them on for £1. Quite a decent margin. And I think it was around the GFC was the time where I was deciding, am I going to leave and go into the trades? Because, I was tossing up between being an electrician or a carpenter when I was around that age. But the GFC happened and there was literally no work. So I'm from the west of Ireland, not a lot of opportunities in that part of the world. Basically, you need to live in one of the cities, either Belfast or Dublin, if you want, good employment prospects. So I thought, you know what, let's hunker down. I'm not too bad at the old academic side. So stayed in school and ended up going to Scotland in Glasgow for university, doing psychology, politics, and economics. So quite different to being in the trades. But yeah, I was really thankful for that time because it was moving there that really started to, the kid from rural Ireland in the big smoke, in Glasgow, and met some great friends. And yeah, just that sort of where things started to take off. I came from we didn't have huge amounts of money growing up. So I needed to put myself through school in terms of paying the rent in Glasgow and all the rest of it. Obviously, student loans helped, grants helped and things like that. But because of that, it meant that I needed to get a job and a decent paying part-time job. So an opportunity came up to get into car rental, actually. So there was an internship at Enterprise Rent-A-Car. It was really a fork in the road moment in my life. My plan when I went to university is I'll travel in the first year and then I'll do internships for the preceding summers. But in my first year, I went to this career fair and there was a guy there and he was not far off my age. And he was like, yeah, it's great. I work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car. I get to drive around in like Range Rovers and Jaguars. And I really like cars. So I was like, this is great. And he was only like 20, 21 at the time. So I applied for this internship and got the ability to start as an intern during the summer. So I was interning from June, I think, to July. And I had arranged for myself and my friend to go to Ghana in August to do some volunteer work there because I've always loved Africa and I've always wanted to go out and just experience the country and the community there. But as it turned out, I didn't do too bad in my internship and they said, listen, we would like to keep you on permanently on a part-time basis. So I sort of came to this crossroads where it was, do I leave, do the volunteer work for 3 weeks, not get paid, and then sort of relinquish that opportunity to hone my business skills further? Or do I take that permanent part-time job, which I can ramp up in the summer times and around Christmas? So I chose the latter, and I ended up having to forego that opportunity to go to Ghana. It's always sort of niggled at me that. But as a result, it meant that by the end of my 4 years at uni, I was coming out with 3 years of actual experience in an office environment and everything else. So in terms of that decision from a business and career point of view, it was absolutely the right one. So I ended up in outdoor education, which is the story of how I got that job, as maybe an episode in itself. But yeah, so I started there, and that job working at Camps International really opened my eyes to social enterprise, for one. So it was going around schools, basically getting students signed up to overseas enrichment expeditions. For every student who I would go in, and for every one person who believed in themselves that they could fundraise for these opportunities, there would be 9 students sitting there, and their parents come up to me after being like, Tommy, these expeditions look awesome. Incredible countries, incredible projects that you're doing. But the price tag is just, we can't fundraise for that. It's not for people like us. So that always sort of stuck with me. And that has really informed the social impact element of A1 Connect, because I want to be able to make sure that in generating a business that gives me financial freedom and everything, that business owners in the unique position that we are, we should always be paying it forward. So coming up with programs whereby scholarships for students who, I don't know if you were like this at school as well, but when I was 16, I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do,
No, I'm not sure I know now.
But they're the most interesting people, the people who don't know what they want to do, because when you go at life with that sort of really wide vision of boundless opportunity, you can end up in really, really awesome scenarios that takes you down sort of many different paths. So yeah, it's really those types of students that I'd like to be able to, let them believe that just because you're from a certain postcode, that certain opportunities aren't available to you. They absolutely are. You just might need to think of, a third door to get into that room, rather than the traditional avenues that those who are more fortunate get to use.
Absolutely. I can imagine that would have been quite a powerful experience to have stuck with you, seeing those people face to face, having these conversations, presenting this opportunity, and then it not being available to them. That's one that would stick. And so tell me, I'm sort of seeing, I guess, a little bit of the social side of things coming through. Of course, I know by researching you, you took a step into the world of media, of B2B media in particular. Quite a different world again then, and a little bit less sometimes focused on the social enterprise side of things. But tell me about that experience.
Yeah, so I got involved in B2B media purely by necessity. So when I came to Australia in 2016, I had full intentions, like many of us, to just do the East Coast and then travel through Asia back home. I've always loved traveling, but I got here and it was a beautiful summer. I remember sitting in Barangaroo. I had a scooter. It was the first schooner I ever had. Condensation just dripping down and looking out, and everyone seemed really happy in those palm trees. I was like, I definitely want to hang around here for a bit longer than 6 months, I think. So as soon as I realized that, I was like, right, need to get sponsored. So I went to a recruiter and I said, here's my skill set, and listed all the companies that I'd worked for and the things that I'd done. And obviously a lot of it was sales based. So they said, you've got 2 options. You can either go into recruitment or you can go into media. And I chose media because I'd done the recruitment thing and I really didn't like, you can do all the work in the world, but someone can change their mind. And then all of a sudden that commission goes out the door because people's circumstances change. Whereas when you're dealing with media, you're dealing with a budget and we need to reach this type of client, and that's it. So it started out purely from necessity. And then as my career went on, I started out at Momentum Media, Lawyers Weekly. Momentum have a lot of professional services publications. And then I ended up at Malab. They do custom publishing for quite a lot of professional services institutions. And yeah, so I was basically on the sales side for a long time, but I would always notice particularly when clients who had large agencies representing them, I knew for a fact those agencies would be going to those clients saying, oh, we've got great connections, and they absolutely do, or we'll get the absolute best value for you. But in reality, particularly with those bigger businesses, it's usually a junior executive who calls up the salesperson and says, this is the brief. This is the activity that we need to book in. What's the price? You give them the price and they say, yeah, no problem. We'll take our 10% agency commission. And I just thought it was a bit of a disservice to those clients who, and I'm sure they will have been getting value elsewhere in those relationships. But for me, I thought I seen an opportunity whereby you could offer a fee structure that is tied to the performance of that value proposition, i.e. saving a client money. So I came up with this idea to basically have a structure in place whereby instead of that 10% commission, we keep the first 10% of commission and 50% of any saving after that. So it meant the client knew that we were actually financially incentivized to get the absolute lowest possible rate for that client and give them the best possible service. And, when you have someone who's senior, who's sold on that side, speaking to these industry publications, it's a unique proposition to be able to say, I know that is of value. I know that is added value, and being able to quickly decipher what's best for the client. So it started as that. And then the A1 idea originally was going to be purely centered around students. But I realized quite early on in the piece that one, I would need to monetize something and give that barrier that I was trying to prevent. So I decided, no, let's make that part of the business, because I do believe that there should be some sort of purpose element in every business. That will be the purpose element. It allows those students to have that low barrier to entry when they do decide to do our programs. I suppose it's like that concept of ikigai. I don't know if you've heard of that before.
Yeah, I just read the book recently. There's a little book that's out on this, and gosh, I love this concept.
Yeah, it's a great concept. And for anyone listening, basically ikigai is four quadrants, and you have to think about what you're good at, what you're passionate about, what's good for the world, and what can make you money. And that sort of intersection between those four quadrants is this concept called ikigai. So, I was thinking about this and I was like, right, what am I good at? Well, I'm good at, negotiation, creativity. I enjoy those things. I'm passionate about providing opportunity to people. There's a lot of money that can be made particularly in B2B. And I think providing these opportunities to students from underserved communities is good for the world, because the more people that can be propelled into better circumstance, the more people they can help. And it's constantly, I'm a big believer of that, paying it forward and that ability to really sort of affect change. That's where A1's iteration as it is now, specializing in video podcast production and media buying, that's how it came about, and the thought process behind it. Because, I love stories. That's actually another thing that my friends would describe me as. I love a good story down at the pub, one hand on the bar and another with a pint in hand. And just telling good stories, I think, is so important and so timeless. I think it doesn't matter when in human history you pick whatever point and there is someone who's telling a good story. And that's what I believe that video podcasts can really do. And obviously what you're doing, although it's not a video podcast as such, you're still getting great stories into the minds of people and allowing it to go in all sorts of directions for the individual that's listening. I know I've listened to some of the episodes and, they just sparks thoughts. And I just love that whole concept. And that's why that particular platform and medium is what I really enjoy doing. The post-production, I'm not a huge fan of. That's usually the first thing that will be delegated.
Amen.
But the on-set production and working with the talent and, just listening to these awesome stories and educational elements as well is hugely enjoyable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's nice to hear that since you first landed in Australia, you have upgraded from schooner to punt while telling your stories. It seems like a natural progression, but I agree. Stories are what sticks. for us in our minds as humans, it's how we make new connections. It's how we join, thoughts on one thing and thoughts on another thing to create the right story for ourselves, to understand ourselves better. So I couldn't agree more. Tell me about some of the first steps you took into making this a real business, into go, all right, do you know what? I've got this idea now. I'm gonna start getting it out there. What steps did you take? And I'm particularly interested in how you started thinking about taking it to market and getting some clients.
Well, I'm a big believer of if you build it, they will come. So I was doing things very early on in the piece that most people wouldn't do when it comes to building a business. So I was thinking about, right, what's the company structure that's going to work to allow this to be something that can scale for not just me, but my family, anyone who I want to bring into the business. So I invested a lot in terms of getting the company structure right, which most people don't do right at the start. But it was important to me to build something that was really tangible and had, I suppose, credibility. Because I could have started out as a sole trader with an ABN, and that is a low barrier to entry, but it certainly helped when it came to particularly around media buying. When you're a PTY limited company and you're saying, right, this is what we do, we specialize purely in B2B industry publications, it was a lot easier to have those conversations with clients as a company as opposed to an ABN. And obviously sat down and thought about, did a proper business plan and everything else. So I did a lot of the things that were probably cart before the horse. But in my mind, I was like, if I build this thing that actually exists and spend the money to do that, I'm a lot less likely to put that then in the too hard basket. It's like, this is a thing now. It's something that I need to keep alive, And obviously got the website up and running, just the MVP. I'm a big believer of, if you seek perfection, it's never going to come. So I got some semblance of a website out there, which I then improved in different iterations as time went on. And yeah, just had some really good conversations, used LinkedIn quite a bit to see sort of people and companies that align with the business, and had those conversations. Obviously the B Corp environment, a lot of companies there align value-wise with the business. It was just all about getting out there and speaking to as many people as possible, offering these services. And then I suppose a big change for me then in terms of really having the business taking off was joining BNI. I don't know if you've heard of that. So BNI it's a global business network. And essentially what they've done is they've managed to gamify referrals. So the idea is you join this group, and it's all business owners or business leaders. A lot of them are small business owners, so are going through similar things. And the idea is when you take up your occupation in one of the groups, it's a competitor-free environment. So you end up with a team of people who are constantly thinking about how they can refer people they know. And then basically the idea is like giver's game. So that automatically aligned with my philosophy of wanting to always pay it forward. And joining that group, I was speaking with people who I'd never normally speak with, accountants, lawyers, these sorts of people. Although I might have spoken to them from a business point of view, I never really hung around and, got to know what life is like for them. And you pick up all these sorts of ideas. But it's been really transformational for the business in terms of, you get to build up credibility, and then you have people referring you work. And it works hugely well, and it provides that community as well. Because when you're starting out and you don't have that team, I'm someone who thrives around a team and thrives around people, and that is one of the elements of being a business owner, particularly at the start when you're starting something from scratch. It can be quite lonely, so having those communities are really important. I was also in another community of impact business owners, and again, just having people who are in the same boat as you that you can speak with, share the pain, share the wins as well, was hugely important. And it sort of gives you, even though you don't necessarily have a team right at the start, I do have a few people working with me now, but certainly at the start, the community that you're part of gives you that strength. Like, you're going into meetings with, you've got a network and a support network around you. It was hugely important.
Yeah, you just touch on so many of my favorite topics there in telling your story. I don't know why it still shocks me to hear that other people feel the same way, because as you do start to talk to more and more people in the same boat trying to start something for themselves, you do realize we have so much more in common than we think. But setting the bar just a little bit higher than you're comfortable with in the early stages. So, yeah, like you said, setting up a PTY LTD, making an investment of that significant amount of money into the business, to be like, I am taking this seriously. You are showing yourself that you're taking this seriously as well. Having a website out there, I even find that with my own business with this podcast, if I just get it out there just a little bit more, it means I sort of have to keep going, because then I'm letting other people down, as opposed to just being able to kind of shirk off into the darkness and let myself down. So, having that bar.
It's an accountability thing. Like, there's so many statistics around there, particularly around the likes of weight loss or any sort of habit that you're trying to either take up or kick. You say that publicly and you are a hell of a lot more likely to actually succeed with it, rather than keeping it. Oh yeah, I'm thinking about working on this thing. I'll just keep it on the down low. I won't tell anyone in case I fail. And in doing that, you give yourself an out in case it does get too hard. You can just be like, yeah, no, that was a nice idea, but moving on. Whereas when you actually say, I'm making a podcast every week, you then are like, no, I've said it. I need to follow through with my word. So I think it's important to think like that when you're starting what is a monumental task, trying to get a business off the ground from scratch. And it's not easy. And having that accountability is super, super important, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. As is that networking piece, which we all hate doing, but finding the right groups to join and be a part of and engaging in them in a way that you're comfortable with, and also just a little bit uncomfortable with. I couldn't agree anymore with those aspects, because it can be a really lonely gig. So yeah, finding people who won't just tell you, it might be a bit easy to go back and just work for somebody else. It's really important as well, because, our brains are looking for that easy way out. And, it's important to have those people around you. I'd love to know your first client. No, you don't have to tell me what you did, but I'd just love to know the experience of landing your first client. What did it look like? How did it feel?
Well, for me, because I had a background in sales, landing the client didn't have that buzz that it does for a lot of people, because it's like, of course I did. That's what I've been doing for years. Like, that's not the surprise. The joy I got from it was landing, but then also being responsible for the delivery. Because usually my background has been, I'm the tip of the spear. I go in, I make the sale. I have a support team behind me who does the execution element. And then it's, on to the next one. Whereas when it was my first client, and it was A1's first client, it was like, right, I've made the sale. Now the work starts, and making sure like throughout that the client felt, communicated with, because that's another thing that can creep in. Certainly around media and agencies, there's either an over communication or an under communication. So I always like to make sure when I'm starting out with any clients, how do you like to be communicated with? There's that adage of, treat others how you'd like to be treated. But I actually don't agree with that. Treat others how they would like to be treated, because how you like to be treated might be completely different to the person that you're speaking with, So I get varying different answers for certainly I think we're up to about 15, 20 clients now that we've worked with over the last 2 years. And the responses are always different. Some might be like, oh yeah, maybe just send it through in an email. So there's someone who just likes top line points. Others want to, have a meeting about it, Zoom call. And it's really working and being bespoke to what the client wants. And then just being timely with your deliveries, all of these things. And then seeing that come to fruition, seeing the results, that felt awesome, because it was like, wow, I've now done the whole thing myself. I've made the sale. I've executed the project. I'm now like an accountant going on to Xero, raising the invoice. And look, the money has just hit my account, and it's not a paycheck. It's an actual invoice for a project. So it was great. And all you need is one. If you get one, and doesn't matter where it is in the business. So if you're starting a business, get one client. If you're starting if you have an idea for a new product or service within your business, find one, do it to the best of your ability, and the rest will come.
It's so true. And it just takes all of that pressure off then, doesn't it? Because you're not thinking about the next 10 things you need to do. You're just thinking about the one. I think that's brilliant advice. And great point on how clients want to be treated. It's like a love language, isn't it? Like we can't just assume that the other person like wants that kind of detail. Like I know I sort of struggle with really long emails. I'm just like, nope, I don't have the attention span for this. It's like bullet point me, and then maybe we have a 30-minute catch up at another stage. And that certainly doesn't work for everybody. So I love that. I think that's really important advice. Now, we had a catch up some weeks back now for listener. You, Tommy and I met through LinkedIn. Tommy has some great content. We connected, had a conversation. And in that call, you shared just inadvertently a productivity tip with me, just a way to make my life a little bit easier that I didn't ask for it. And all of a sudden it was there. I was like, you've just changed my life. So I feel like you're somebody who values automation, tech, productivity, things like that to make things work a bit easier. Talk to me about that in your life and in your business, how you use it, any tips, how you manage your day-to-day, because there is an awful lot of admin involved in your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right in saying that. I'm a big fan of technology, not from a I love tech point of view, because actually I think I was 21 or 22 before I had my first smartphone. I was someone who really resisted the getting on social media and all. I was that person. And I still am to an extent. When there's certain things that are in the zeitgeist, I do tend to be like, no, I don't want to go with the crowd. I want to do my own thing. Again, it was out of necessity that I got my first smartphone. My laptop died and an iPhone was cheaper than a laptop, and I needed to get my emails from uni. So that's how I ended up with a smartphone. I was like, here, this isn't too bad, you know? And so I like the fact that you can use technology as a tool to make your life easier. One of our sort of guiding principles is that communication is aided by technology, not replaced by it. So you can use things like Calendly to cut out a hell of a lot of back and forth around when you're scheduling a meeting with a client. I think even within that, using Calendly and booking links, I think there's a certain etiquette and a way that you present it to your client. Because some people be like, hold on, you want to speak to me to sell me something, and I have to go and book. That can get some people's nose out of joint. So when you deliver a booking link, what I would recommend is say, be great to catch up. Here's a link to my live availability. Let me know which one of these time slots work, and I can send you a calendar invite, or alternatively, you can just book in a time using that link. It's up to you.
I love that tip. That is, I get so many Calendlys, and I actually, for some reason, they really put me off. I just, oh, fuck, I gotta go click a thing or do a thing. So that's a great tip.
Yeah. And also I don't know if there are any Google users listening, but Microsoft would be the same. You actually have a native calendar appointment scheduling tool in each of those platforms. So you don't need to pay for the likes of Calendly, because Calendly is free, but if you're doing the premium version to get all these other bells and whistles, a lot of those bells and whistles come native with what you're already using. So I think just getting smarter around that. I'm a big fan of ClickUp, which is my project management tool. And that's where basically any sort of idea. So this book that we were talking about was Building a Second Brain. And there's a system in there that really resonated with me in terms of when ideas come to you. I don't know if you're like this, Kim, but my ideas come in the most random places. Like it's usually in the shower,
yes,
when I'm out walking. It's always somewhere where I'm nowhere near a pen and paper, you know?
Mine will be sometimes in mid-conversation with somebody, which is really, it makes me appear very rude, and I'm hyper conscious of it, but I'll be having dinner with my parents and I'm like, they're telling me a story. I'm like, and they're like, you're not listening. I'm like, I know, it's just, I have to write this thing down. You've just triggered a thought and I have to get it down. So I get it. You can't stop those ideas.
And you shouldn't. It's how you capture those ideas. It's the right thing to capture them right there, because otherwise you lose them, you know? So it's this code framework, which is an acronym for capture, organize, distill, and express. So taking an idea of you speaking with your parents and that idea comes to you, that's the capture phase. And it's what are you using to capture that? So I use ClickUp, whereby I actually have the thing on my watch. If an idea comes to me, I'll dictate it into the watch, and that is then a reminder on the platform. And then once a week, I'll go in and specifically organize that hodgepodge of, because you don't have to organize it right there and then. You just go in, set some time to organize those thoughts, and then you distill what's good. What of these ideas are good? And then the express thing is creating the content in that particular example. Now, it's not always in creative fields. It can be any other sort of learning that you're doing. But doing that has really helped me retain a lot of information more than I used to. And there's another part in that book as well, that another acronym. Most people, and you're taught this at school, you organize things by subject, so you would have your math folder, you would have your geography folder. The point of this book was you actually organize where you're going to action. So you have project folder. That's where you're working on something that has a deadline. You put it in the project folder. It doesn't matter if it's internal marketing, if it's a client, all of those projects with deadlines go in that folder. Then you have the areas, which are sort of always on. So they don't have a deadline as such, but it's good to have a dedicated area to that. Resources are, I might get to that later. And then archive is, I'm done. So basically your projects will go into the archive eventually once you've completed them. It's simple enough that, because I'm someone, even though it might sound like I'm really organized, I'm someone who's organized not naturally. I'm organized because I know being organized will make me better. So that structure of projects, areas, resources, archive is just been really transformational in terms of, right, that's got a deadline, I'm putting it here. Because before that, I had folders and file names and everything was, my desktop looked crazy. Unfortunately, I've still not been able to nail organizing tabs on the Google Chrome. Well, that'll be something for another day.
We just do what we can bit by bit, but they are some excellent tips. I'm going to check out ClickUp. I just started using Notion, and there's a particular person I'm thinking of who will listen to this episode and be like, thank God she started using Notion, because I'm finally starting to get myself organized. So that feels like it could be a very interesting build on to that. While we're on the subject of tips, you've talked about your negotiation skill set and that kind of space being a happy place. And I'm pretty passionate about sales generally. I have a background in sales, but also a real value for sales when it comes to any kind of business. I can't think of a single business where you're not selling something to someone at some point. And negotiation is a really key part of that. What are your key tips when managing a negotiation that we could take on board?
So in terms of managing negotiation, you need to always remember that you're speaking to someone who, from a completely different background to you, has completely different value set. So the skill in the negotiation part is learning what the person that you're negotiating with values. So using an example of when it comes to media buying and things like that, most media salespeople care about making sales and making their monthly budgets. So when negotiating, you should never concede without a concession from the other party. So say, for example, you own a business and you're a service-based business and you have decided, right, I've got a client on board. They want this in terms of monthly deliverables. I'm going to get them on a retainer. Great. And you propose it to them and they come back and they say, yeah, see, that's just not in the budget. Would you be able to do that exact same thing, but for like $1,000 less every month? And some people might be like, oh, at least it's $2,000. A bird in the hand is better than two in the bush. But really at that point, in terms of setting your own stature within that negotiation, you can say, yeah, listen, if budget is a problem, we can absolutely work around it. But what I'd need to do is take deliverables out so that it can align with that budget, because it wouldn't be commercially viable for me to do the exact same thing for less. And most people, when you explain it in that way, they'll understand. So, right, okay, no problem. Another thing that helps is time. So if you're someone who's selling a product and someone wants to do something for less and you want to give that concession, make sure you dictate the time frame. It's like, no problem, I'll be able to do that for $2,000, but I would need to get sign off today for it. Therefore, there's still a concession from the other side, particularly around clients and things like that. If you set yourself up as someone who will just go along with whatever they say, you're never going to recover from being on the back foot. And you don't have to be a dickhead about it. if you just explain it in a way and always reframe it in their point of view, I had a client once. I actually walked away from the business. This is in my business. It was when I was an employee, but I walked away from quite a sizable deal because the person was wanting the world for a fraction of. So basically, it was in media sales, and the inventory that he wanted was worth about $200,000. And he wanted to get it. He'd been, advertising for a long time. He wanted to get it for, I think, about 25% of that. And so as a nominal sum of money, it was quite large, and realistically in media, there's inventory that has value. There's inventory that has less value. But ultimately, a large portion of it was value that had an opportunity cost to it. So if I gave it to him for 75% less than it was worth, that is something that I could not sell to someone else. It was a SaaS company. If you had a client that was asking for a significantly lower rate on your product, but it also meant that you couldn't sell your product again, is that something that you would do? And he says, no, but this is different. I was like, no, it's not. It's exactly the same. And saying no to that was one of the best deals I ever made for myself, because year after year, he would come back trying again to get in, and it just wasn't going to fly. So I think knowing when to walk away is really important as well, because again, if you're someone who is selling and on that side of the negotiation, you need to have a hard deck of, this and less. It's not worth it for me. That's what I would say is never split the difference. And that's a title of a book that is also very good for people who may not like negotiating in sales. It's written by a former FBI interrogator. And I'm actually going to Google it here so I can get I always remember the titles. I'm not so good with the authors.
I'm exactly the same. And we'll make sure that we link that into the show notes as well, because I think, A, because I quite want to read that, and B, for anybody else who wants to read that as well. But yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And, in terms of valuing ourselves, particularly when it comes to pricing ourselves in a service-based industry in particular, that can be really challenging because our value is kind of built into that price. And you sort of think, oh yeah, something's better than nothing, but inherently you're just devaluing yourself and what you're worth. So no, I couldn't agree more with that.
Chris Voss is the name of the author.
Okay, very good. We'll make sure to get that into the show notes with a direct link to check that book out on there. I want to switch gears a little bit and just think about your school programs. What was it like to get the first one out there on behalf of your company?
So it's not out there yet. So this is the first full operational year of A1 Connect.
Ooh, how exciting.
So at the end of this financial year, which is a month away, I'll then be able to say, this was our turnover and this is what it equates to in terms of revenue that we're going to contribute towards these scholarships. And I've got quite a few friends of mine who are teachers or in education. And the idea is, let me into the school and we'll put on this program, a pilot program for maybe 4 or 5 students to see what value they can get from it. Costs nothing to the school, costs nothing to the parents. And really it's getting them into the mindset of, I suppose, sales, entrepreneurship, thinking, is really for those people who aren't geared towards being a doctor or an engineer, those vocational degrees, very early on if that's what you want to be. But for a lot of people, the majority, they actually don't know where they want to be. So for those people, having a really solid grounding in the ability to sell and market yourself is really important. And as well as just general life skills, when you're going out and traveling, there are certain things that you can do to make yourself more protected when you go out travel. Like, for example, if you're traveling in a remote part of the world and it's yourself and your friend and you pull into a gas station or fuel station and you don't really know how safe the area is, there's actually a strategy that you can do whereby one of you is filling the fuel tank and the other is sitting opposite. So then between you, you've got a 360 field of view. So it's just thinking about life in that scenario. I suppose it's like trying to teach street smarts, because that's something that you don't really learn until you've made some mistakes. And you can learn from people who've made those types of mistakes, then maybe you'll be less likely to make those mistakes yourself, which I think would be of a lot of value to particularly parents out there who have children who are going to be growing up and going out and doing their traveling. And as most Aussies do, go to Europe or London at some point in their lives. So yeah, it's just really equipping students with those skills, I think, is really, really important. Something I'm really passionate about.
And how exciting to get to the end of the financial year and not just be looking at the revenue, the P&Ls, things like that, which are exciting as a business owner naturally, but to also see where is this landing? And then what can I do with that in terms of giving back? A whole different energy to apply, not just putting it back into your own business, which is very important. And, we like commercial independence, financial independence is, such a big driver for so many of us. But then that extra thing to be like, this is also what I get up for every day is a really good inherent driver. So I love that you have that built in.
Yeah, no, I think that's just really important from a company point of view. I want it to be somewhere, as we scale and grow and are hiring people, that people are coming in and are working for a company that the output is something bigger than themselves. Because I think particularly around marketing and B2B marketing in particular, you can sometimes get into, all right, all I'm doing is going in and working for a company that helps other companies make more money. And I think for a lot of people, particularly that sort of millennial and younger generation, you got to stand for something more than just making other people money. There needs to be some sort of element of impact, in my opinion, that will help people get up and go to work and be like, I'm actually proud to work for A1 Connect or whatever company it is, because you know that, yes, you're helping other companies make more money, but in doing so, you're also helping students from underserved communities make more opportunities in their own lives.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more that impact we make. And I think that's where very much a lot of us end up even starting a business in the first place is I don't want to just go to work for somebody else and it kind of have no value proposition. And, for so many of us as business owners now starting these impact driven companies, even if it's just a part of it, just something, that human impact that you can make, then, it has that ability to attract that loyal, happy team members to be a part of it. So yeah, big fan of that sort of structure. As you grow and as you fulfill all the dreams of your business in terms of giving back more, sustaining yourself, your family, future generations as well with the work that you're doing, how can the listener and I support you to get there?
Well, I think that if you know anyone who wants to produce video podcasts or they want to be in industry publications that are in more B2B inclined. I do have some B2C clients. I'm working with a maths star at the moment. So it's more an entertainment type of podcast. That's to be dropped next month. But yes, just anyone with a good story to tell who wants to, have some assistance telling it, that'll be great. And also anyone who knows of any schools who may, particularly around Sydney. So it needs to be around the Sydney locale because that's where I'm based. It would be great to have some introductions there because, it's not just about the business making money. It's also about what communities can we help.
Absolutely. Well, I will make sure that we've got links to your website so the listener can go learn more about you or refer a way to get you on your way with that mission. You've shared so many wonderful tips with us as well as, excellent storytelling as to be expected. So thank you for that. Thank you for spending this time with me this afternoon to share your story and your business building journey, because Lord knows we need that community to help us all keep going and hear about what it's like for others. So thank you for that. It's been my absolute pleasure to hear your story today.
Thanks for having me, Kim, and really thanks a lot for what you're building as well. It's a great resource for many people, and I think what you're doing ties into that community element that I was talking about earlier on. It's the stories are really, really helpful, and they do make a difference.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm going to remember that feedback when I am, like you were talking about at the beginning, in audio editing mode. I'm going to hold on to that. So thank you very much. The pleasure is all mine. One quick thing. If you're hearing this, you've listened all the way through. Hopefully that means you really like this podcast because it's pretty generous to give up 40 odd minutes of your time for it. If that is the case, please leave the show a star rating and a review. It helps me reach so many more people who might also listen all the way through and get some benefit and some support out of it. Not to mention, it puts a real spring in my step to read them. Thank you for listening to Unemployed and Afraid, the podcast for small business builders with your host, me, Kim Curtin. If you love it, you can say thanks with a star rating and a review. And of course, join the community on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Find us at Unemployed and Afraid wherever you're hanging out, and I'll see you there.